Oh, I should have turned off Slack. Nobody Slack me. Okay. So thank you for joining us today. This is actually one of my favorite topics. And when it was mentioned in the A-Team room a few weeks ago, I was like, yes, I can do that. And then obviously work keeps happening. So it took me a while. I'm sorry. I have put in, so obviously this is my favorite subject. If you want to talk about this anytime, then book me in. I'd be very happy to go through any projects that you've got and suggest some ideas. But basically, this is about how to design your data to enable intelligent attribution. So your data dimensions within your business. Just a little bit of backstory. So when we were on the Slack call a couple of weeks ago, Stuart Butterfield, he was talking about how work life has been completely disrupted and how he used to be a file clerk. So he was filing all day at university, which reminded me that I used to also do a lot of filing. So one of my first jobs was filing photo evidence for the body in barrels Snowtown murderers. Also filing invoices that had been sent through the fax machine with liquid paper, like Stuart reminded me of. I spent a lot of my time searching through microfiche machines at the Lands Titles office. I had to take photographs, old-fashioned film into Kodak, get it printed, and then bring it back the next day, staple it into reports. So that's how we used to put photos into reports. And then at the end of the day, before 4 p.m, I'd have to go in and actually file documents into all of the banker pigeonholes at all of the big banks. So definitely I know a bit about filing. It was probably inevitable though, because this is what my bookshelf looked like at about age 7. So it's pretty likely that I would fall into a career that required some kind of sense and order. And this is my dad's office. So there he has every single electrical component labeled and filed. I think being pedantic makes life very efficient and productive. But what I've learned, and this is probably the most important piece, is that the only thing that takes longer than filing and is more time consuming is searching for things that have been filed incorrectly. So a few lessons I've learned in life is when employees get each other's paychecks because somebody filed them into the wrong envelope, that can be devastating. When electorates get ads for the wrong politician, or bank valuations of a house or a business is posted to neighbours or competitors. So obviously it can be quite difficult to find things in these old libraries, and I did put in a joke, and I hope I don't offend anybody, but I said I was often finding things illogically filed in libraries, especially in the theology section. Okay. The time that filing becomes most important is when you try to pull something complex apart and have the intent to put it back together again, and you actually expect it to work. So pulling apart motors and washing them with petrol on the weekends was one of my weekend chores. It's the pulling it apart and putting it back together that is where I'm going to try and gently segue into the importance of good data filing practices. So a lot of business intelligence projects, they get stuck where you've applied so many band-aids, connected many systems together, but then the data that you're getting through, you're not able to actually create those beautiful dashboards that you're expecting. A lot of that is because there's a lack of structure in your filing. So if you can't use that data to effectively analyze, you can't use it to predict, then basically your data isn't being used for the purpose that it's there for. So a lot of what we talk about with structure, with automation and artificial intelligence is about structuring. So we have to have structure to enable scale. Artificial intelligence is pretty much just that the computer understands what happened in the past, analyze that data so well that it can predict what will happen next. And automation is essentially just making it so clean cut that you can do it faster, repeatedly at scale with inbuilt analysis. So why become intelligent? This is something that I talk about quite a bit, which is making sure that your data is enabling intelligent use. This is so we can take advantage of AI, especially machine learning, and use those data capabilities to improve absolutely everything. So often marketing innovation is led, often innovation is led by the marketing team within a business, because they're the ones with the budget and the responsibility. They have to answer for it. But I argue that it should sit with operations, and that it can touch on everything from customer acquisition to product development to employee retention. So a quick look at the companies who appreciate data is a strategic asset. Google obviously wants to organize the world's information, making it accessible and useful. So if we think about the Internet of Things and the data that's being connected on all of your devices, you pass thousands of beakers and sensors within a day. So every washing machine, every windscreen wiper, your watch, it actually has a name and it collects data. And so the winner in big data will be that company that categorizes and catalogs all this information and can use it for predictions. And that's not far away. Amazon still has the original vision of all of the big, large data collectors, which is helping consumers find, discover, and buy anything. Slightly more ethical, human-centered vision from Adobe. Digital delivery of an immersive and compelling experience. So that's content, right person, right time. One of these big data companies will achieve that intelligent structuring of data for the last frontier. And I say that that is business. And Salesforce vision there is improving the state of the world through the business of business. So just going to interrupt myself quickly to say I've used a lot of capital letters and bold, and I'm sorry to Nicola. But where I've put a capital letter, that's potentially a data dimension. So when we're looking at business strategy, we're talking about designing data dimensions. So if it's in capitals, in bold, think about that as a potential data dimension for your business. So you need to start with what is the structure of a business. So obviously this can apply to our customers as well. But in a business, it used to be structured around chain of command, span of control, centralization, work specialization. That was basically how the workers engaged with each other to achieve the employer's goals. Whereas now, especially with what we do, it's almost entirely focused on human experience. So that's customer first and employees too. It's decentralized, and with the right data first culture, it can be much simpler. So you need to know yourself as well, and your competitor just as intimately. So figure out these, especially these items. Is your category service, merchandising, manufacturing? Who are your category, product, and persona competitors? What features are you offering? What are the price points? Where are you located? How do you market? What are the service channels? What goals lead to conversion? We're going to talk a lot about funnels. Who do you sell to? Who do your competitors sell to? So those personas. What is the customer experience life cycle? And what metrics indicate funnel health? And then you're probably asking where this is going. I know all of this. How is this relevant? It's because we think we know it all, but most businesses don't have this written down on one page. Documenting this onto a single page becomes your business structure document. It creates basically an architecture on a page, and you use that throughout the entire business as your shared taxonomy. This was a key point that I was trying to make today, is that your business structure also becomes your data taxonomy for any tracking, any digital analytics, any business intelligence tools. So it's very simple to create a taxonomy, because if you have an operating business, then it should be based entirely around how that business is operating. You need to make sure that the business is using those same structured data, universal naming conventions. And if you can do this small piece of work, it enables economies of scale. So taxonomy just means naming conventions, classifications. It's hierarchical. It can change as the information does, so it's not just set in stone. On the right-hand side, you can see some of the things that you should probably have names for. And I mean, some of these can be assumed, some might change. Like, for example, if you're looking at brands, you know that Coke Zero is beneath the Coke brand. So sometimes in your taxonomy, you might just use zero and assume the next level above it. But at least in one document, make sure that you've got it highlighted there. The many obvious ways that it can help enable scale is in asset management and reporting and optimization. So I honestly don't believe you should be reporting unless you're planning to optimize. So I would call it optimization. But if I say just optimization, people freak out. So reporting and optimization. I can't tell you how many hours I've spent in meetings where people have gone around and around in circles talking about absolute basics of the business. If you can at least get the taxonomy locked in, get buy-in, especially from the top down, make sure that the executives know that you're trying to build a taxonomy, present it to them, get their buy-in, then you're going to save yourself a lot of headache in future. Once you've got it on one page, and I'm going to go into how, but once you've got it on one page, it will actually change the lives of your customers and your employees. You can answer so many business questions with it. I can't tell you how many times, and it turned into a bit of a joke, and which is why we've got Robot Man on the right, where people would ask the same question repeatedly, and the answer was always, have you looked at Robot Man? And it became a joke. It ended up being on, like, you know, my Christmas cards and birthday cards and everything. But anything that gets the point across, having a taxonomy will make your business operate better. It doesn't matter what it looks like. It will be integral to your business. You can roll it out on posters. You can put it in Confluence. You can put it on cheat sheets for the frontline employees. Every part of the business can benefit from having this. So after you've gotten buy-in from executives, you've gotten the people across it, you need to roll the taxonomy out into processes and tools. I've got many slides to go through, so I will go into more detail, but ask me any questions afterwards. But basically, you need marketing, sales, and IT, or the customer experience and IT, to use the same language in the CRM, in the CMS, on all ad networks. The example on the right, that's our social media monitoring topic profiles. Just make sure that that naming convention pulls through. So the name of your strategy meeting in your calendar, the tickets in Jira, your campaign images, the folder names in your automation engine, tracking codes on your ads, goal names in your analytics, dashboards in your BI, exactly the same words to the character with the same separators. So answering one of the questions, like why do it right? It's because good naming conventions impact the entire business. I would suggest that revenue operations is the most important piece. I could do a whole nother presentation on that, but you basically define the key metrics for each stage of the funnel. And it's possible to have within a business, especially B2B, which I've worked in a bit, one executive in the business owns each metric, which is, yeah, it's good for accountability. But essentially your website information architecture, so including all of your search engine optimization, all of your paid search keywords, they will all be in your taxonomy. If you do this, you know, in depth, like, you know, on your website folder structure, the parent-child folder structure, in the alt text on your website, Google will reward you for getting it right. Then there's also obviously your BI and analytics is the most critically reliant on taxonomy. But every part of the business can be automated. So I've put a few ideas in here, and every business is slightly different, but I'm going to show some examples. Even legal, HR, and finance, you can simplify document management. Like I've put there an example. If the PDF is automatically named with the naming convention, it will automatically name the subject line of the email. You can automatically marry that up to whatever is being done in any of those finance tools, for example. What are the impacts of a poor taxonomy and naming conventions? What happens if it's done poorly? This is my favorite. I use this all the time. Even with the best gear in the world, infinite time and budget, shit in will create shit out. So it just should be really obvious to most of us. We have a lot more experience with coding, even with autocorrect. Every single character matters. So if you don't do it right, it's not going to work. I'll show some videos. I won't show them, but I'll share some videos after. And you can be bringing in 280 million lines of code, and one character can stop an entire dashboard from working. And it takes time to figure that out. You can serve up the wrong dynamic content. It creates a terrible customer experience, but not least because you can't assess it or optimize it. A lack of data design impacts everything in a business, and the longer that it goes on, it's harder to fix. You'll get to the stage where you have 9 different birthday fields, but you can't send out a happy birthday email. You've got 6 name fields, but you can't personalize by first name without using extra joins and formulas. I don't see the point in doing something if you can't measure it or improve it. And we did talk about the 80% of analytics and attribution projects failing. They aren't cheap projects either. Sometimes they're like 100 grand. I've seen probably 3 or 4 taking Salesforce back to vanilla projects that were upwards of $1 million. Then there's business impact as well. So it's really, really important to make sure that anywhere that you have a say over how business data is structured, that you stand up for it and say, you know, is this the right way to do it? And worst case scenarios, campaign money wasted, millions of dollars wasted, brand reputation damage, channel attribution. It can be, you know, the budget can be taken away from one team and given to another team because attribution wasn't being reported correctly. Teams being made redundant due to operational failures. Don't think that's uncommon. That's actually the primary material event this year is redundancy, restructuring, and bankruptcy in business. So it's really like it's all of our job to take it seriously. So conversely, what are the opportunities of a taxonomy done well? So being able to pivot, so that's something that we've obviously learnt a lot about in our recent adventures. If there's an opportunity, if there's a threat, being able to pivot. Executive trust and decision making. It will make everyone's lives easier if you've proven that this is going to help. This piece of data, this piece of predictive data, this piece of analytics can help you make a confident decision. Automation, just having a bit more respect. Like obviously, I've spent many years arguing with people around, let's just let the machines try it. Let's just A/B test it. Let's not rely on gut feel any longer. It's time to let the people choose. And that's kind of, yeah, amazing customer experience as well. Enabling the use of machine learning. So that's the big one for me, being able to use automation at scale, scaled output, being able to do more with less, making sure that you ship and iterate. The biggest gain is also in system-oriented architecture rather than object-oriented architecture. And even though people try to get away with it, you will still need to use very strong taxonomy and naming conventions, even in a system-oriented architecture world. There's just fewer things to memorize. Have I got 2 of the same? Sorry. Okay, so that's kind of that. Yeah, so I did put in here, and skip to the 6-minute point if you like. This was my 4th business intelligence project, and the first 3 were boring MSBI, but this 4th one was Domo. And I liked it so much that I made 2 videos about it. But if you wanted to see what can happen with a fresh implementation of taxonomy end to end, skip to minute 6 and also show some screenshots. But if you watch after this ETL piece, it will show you exactly what you can actually build using a nice, clean, start fresh end-to-end process, which I'm about to show you how to do. And these are some of the dashboards. So how do you approach naming conventions when you don't get to start from scratch? So say you're taking over from a different digital partner, or we're taking on a new client. The best case is obviously making the time to do it properly, investigating fully. But if there is crappy tracking in place, it does take a bit of a longer process to clean it up. You still need to investigate and document everything. So check out, obviously the tools that you have will make a difference as to what you can do, but review what is going in, review what comes out, and then figure out what's missing. So check the data at both ends, and based on the marketing structure especially, or whoever is holding that budget and has briefed you, find out what they've tried and what are the minimum fields. Like I'm really happy, like I can help audit these kinds of things within like 20 minutes on a screen share if you need help. Always check the source code on the website. Get the logins if you can. It's always hard to get the logins from a webmaster, but if you can, then obviously it's going to save so much time. Log into, if they've got Google Analytics, which most people should, check goals, check the SMART goals, check their conversion pages, and then the pages before the conversions. It's also best to fill in a form, find yourself, check your lead source, and then follow yourself through those same systems. If you've got any questions, let me know. How do you approach naming conventions when you don't get to start from scratch? Again, yeah, sorry. So a lot of this you'll probably get from a lot of the D2, but look at the campaign and reports objects. See how they're set up. Look at the standard field status and stages. Jump into their systems, whichever systems you can get access to. Just have a look at the reporting and any kind of tracking that's been built in the past, and get internal knowledge transfer from the people. So ask the admins and the analysts. Like, we don't often get to speak to the analysts in what we're doing, but they're probably the ones that we need to get closest to if you're working on a BI project especially. Ask the web team for a CMS tour, and spend some time with the design team. So figure out, how are they naming files? What's the folder structure? Get into Confluence if you can. That will teach you so much about the structure of a business. So say if you're extremely lucky and you can take a new analytics or data or content design project right from the start, and you can design that taxonomy from scratch. You still need to do that business structure and data dimensions piece that I've kind of mentioned. But there's an additional piece that you can do if you're starting from scratch, which can really get you aligned to the business. And that is a stakeholder kind of business question exercise. I'll go through just some questions, but whatever they answer, again, this is where, things, you got to read between the lines and align it to a dimension. Once they answer something, you take that and say, oh, if they're talking about MQLs, then you align that to what they're actually thinking. So some examples of stakeholder business questions. So here I've put in some ideas around what the CMO could be thinking. If they're worried about life cycle, then that means that you'll need to tag and create a taxonomy for, everything from acquisition to retention. If they're worried about channels, then you may want to use, campaign types so that you can see the difference between different channels like live event or internal webinars. If they're asking about customer, then you probably need to look at things like personas, and making sure that content or communication strategies align to personas. Where should I assign? Where did I put that one? Influence. Performance, like any of the senior executive roles, I think performance to revenue. It's all performance to revenue. It's all you want to do from top to bottom of the funnel is using the exact same influence metrics throughout the entire system. This one, I've put the CRM team, so that's another team we often work with. They might have more campaign or channel questions. They might want to be talking more about dynamic content, tagging up the assets, which versions of content perform better. If they're doing personalization around industry or region, then that's the kind of place where you would like to lock down naming conventions so that they can pull that through into reporting, and also obviously so they can build AMP script and enable better dynamic content. The data team, that's definitely need to get close to the data team, and that would be, they'll have the most questions and they're the ones that won't even bother to ask them. So I think get on a phone call with them. Pauline did this excellently a couple of weeks ago, and actually say, so how do you use this data? What do you go through in a day? Here's how I'll save you time and make it easier and faster for you. So depending on the tools that you have, you need to use a delimiter that suits your tools. I recommend underscores in Marketing Cloud and Salesforce. You don't want spaces in tracking codes. Spaces break tracking codes. Marketing Cloud automatically uses the names of the EDMs in journeys. So what you want to do is to have the thing that changes the least at the front of your tracking code. Then the things that change more, like it's kind of, it goes from there. So things that change least often are going to tie this, whatever you want to report on. If you want to report on a time period, then put the time period up front. If you want to report on a brand, put the brand up front. If you want to report on a product, like what is the most important thing? And the things that change the least are at the front of your tracking code. The things that change the most are at the end of your tracking code. And that's just for simple filing. Adobe, which is the one that has the columns. Adobe can auto-classify into reporting tables. So Adobe, you have to put the right thing in the right place because it will auto-classify it. Whereas, you know, it really depends on what system you're using. So we can definitely, I can give you some ideas on how to build your tracking codes. Einstein, for example, can also pull campaign IDs from image names. There's a lot more that's being built at the moment that I haven't read up on, but yeah, just consider your tools, consider your delimiters, and don't use spaces. That's the main thing there. Another couple of tips, I just mentioned these. If you're ever asked, you know, for a monthly campaign or a quarterly campaign or data for last quarter, or, you know, always do the next. So if you asked for last quarter, also set up next quarter. If you asked for last month, set up next month. YYMMDD, year, month, date is my favorite because it sorts exactly like the alphabet for dates. And then I've got access to a lot of taxonomies, like I said, but I can show you, I won't show you all of them because there's obviously business information, but you can also combine. So I just put in here one thing that I've done in the past, which is with channels, like, so EDM and event, they can be combined together. That can actually work as a search mechanism. You're always thinking about how to search for the analysts and obviously for your analytics tools. The second example there is combining paid social media with Facebook. It could be organic social versus paid social. It could be Facebook versus Twitter, but it's just kind of showing what information do you need to know in that channel piece. I know, like, make sure it really exists. I have heard, you know, executives and sales reps argue for hours about how we already know all the industries of our customers. And then once you dive into it and you try and analyze it, it's, you know, GICS codes and SIX codes all partially populated. And it's 11:30. Sorry, that was Karen. I forgot to turn her off. But yeah, so make sure that you know the GICS code. Sorry, you know the actual dimensions. Look in all of the systems, make sure they're really there before you promise to do something. And then set it up, get people to self-profile. So on the right, Smartsheet is getting you to profile essentially your industry. I think it was, it's tiny now. But yeah, get your customers to profile themselves. Related, actually not related, but I just thought of it. Cross-device. I know there's a lot of talk about multi-factor authentication going around at the moment. I have a sneaking suspicion that that is just a way to collect cross-device data because of the pending first-party cookie apocalypse. It's basically enabling DMPs. So if you're asked to do MFA, it's literally just connecting your devices. That's my theory anyway. Regions are always a really, really big one. Google countries, for example, if you're doing prospecting ad clicks, they don't match to Salesforce countries and they don't match to Facebook country lists. There'll be a mapping exercise. So you'd usually choose your database of record and take that one and kind of map it. Things like, you know, Palestine doesn't exist in some systems. So just be aware of that. Think about how your business is structured, the business structure piece. And then, yeah, make sure you've built for that and designed your data for that. Campaigns, I'll talk more about campaigns in a minute. I did add some slides at the end, but always build in Salesforce first if you have Salesforce. And that's the case, especially for any of the B2B analytics, Pardot, anything, basically. Write your campaigns, build your campaigns, set up the dates, no end dates. I'll explain why if you need to know. Set up the start dates, owners, types of campaigns in Salesforce. That's your best bet there. And then I have gone into a little bit more detail in the next slides, but tracking taxonomy is just the beginning. Like it's, I don't know, whatever this is, 7th or 8th step. There are many, many other things that are needed to make it work. So I've now added those slides on and they're even worse than the ones that you've just seen. I've also put in a couple of links. So I really believe in simplicity, do it right, and set and forget. Digital business is always underpinned by strong content strategy. I'm still getting people tell me 17 years later that tracking that I set up using old school white hat SEO is still bringing in trackable leads every week. So I just think do it properly, set and forget. So this is the slides that I've added. I'm going to mainly talk about my 3 favorites, Google, Salesforce, and Adobe. And I've oversimplified, but generally the principles are the same no matter what you're doing. You want the ID, who did something. So if that's an anonymous IP address, so often we call them prior to prospects, and they could be third-party cookies, or they're the known someone. So you're looking for that ID of a person. You're tying that into an event, which usually at absolute top of funnel is a click of some kind, bottom of funnel would be goals, and then you need to know when. These are the main things that we're collecting. The way that we need to do this, and this is kind of the order, like I've put in these slides in the order that you'd want to troubleshoot as well, and I've put some troubleshooting at the end. But tracking codes we've obviously covered. Analytics catches, this is basically the JavaScript on the website page that checks, collects your analytics. Goal catches, this could be Tag Manager, that's why I separated those 2 out. Those firing events, if you're using a more event-based tool like Segment.io. And then there's analytics systems. So this could be your actual, like where the analysts get the data from. This is your Google Analytics or your Adobe Analytics or so on. So first step, in any analytics system, you have to enable campaigns. So both Adobe and Salesforce, they have out-of-the-box campaign functionality, but it is not switched on and it is not a small job. So it could be up to 40 pages and 80 steps to set up campaigns properly and campaign influence. And it's the most important thing. So don't forget to do it. That's why you check up front if campaigns have already been set up. And defining the events and how they'll fire. So this is more of the whole documenting again, writing it down, thinking about how it will work before you actually build it. So the simplest can be thank you pages. So after a form submission, the next page that they reach, and there's no other way to reach it, and you're counting that thank you page, then obviously that's a conversion. In like really simple terms, you could have, multiple thank you pages. One could be called thank you and one could be called thanks, and that could be 2 different goals. That could be really simple. For Adobe, you'll need to have a huge list of evals, which are basically events. You might need IT to help set that up. They can potentially be implemented on every single page of a desktop experience or app or calculator or whatever it is. It can be set on a submission button. This is kind of what Interactive Studio is going up against, because with Adobe, you will need IT to come in and help set this up, whereas Interaction Studio is making it easier for you to point and click and say, I want to tag up this button, point at it, and tag it up. You still have to do all of that pre-work, which is around your goal architecture, your website architecture, and all of that. If you're using Google Tag Manager, which you should be, or a Tag Manager, sorry, you need to set up the goals to fire. So that can be, this needs to all be documented before setting up the conversion catches. So once you've defined the conversion events, then you need to set up that piece of JavaScript that goes onto every asset that you're trying to track. So if you do e-commerce, or if your customer's doing e-commerce, then you need to set up the goals differently, and they're a different type of goal. E-commerce goals are different within Google. That's because there's a thing called data freshness, and it's required to enable journey triggers and decision splits and so on, because it's new data 4 hours old, under 4 hours old compared to 48 hours old for current Google Analytics goals. Most importantly, for future state, cross-device. If your business has any apps, any other devices, set up the new Google Analytics app and web, which is based on the Fire App SDK. So app and web, this is again the piece. I had a meeting with some of the Salesforce, the team that are working on Einstein and analytics and everything a few weeks ago, and they said that Interaction Studio and app and web, which is Google's new product, are like working really closely together, and it's pretty much the future of analytics for the cross-device first-party settings. Yeah, that's probably it. Yeah. Oh no, sorry. The one before was the actual goals. Sorry. The catches of the JavaScript. So this is where you actually put it on every page. When you go to a website, you can just look at the source code. You can see which version of Google Analytics or analytics they're using to capture the tracking. If you're absolute Google purist, then you can just use analytics.js. But if you are integrated with other systems like Adobe or Salesforce, you should be using GTag. We definitely need to encourage everybody to set up collect code. So that's Salesforce's own analytics code. That will help with Einstein prediction. If you're using LinkedIn Insight tags and Facebook pixels, if you do any campaigns, or even if you don't, probably should set them up. But that will help build up your first party cookie data if you've set them up to be first party. There's also, so if you are, so I had to troubleshoot some GA360 reporting challenges, work like with SFMC for a customer. If you want more details on the process for that, let me know. But basically the short version is configure all of the automated link tracking parameters, choose to track links for all of the emails in the journey, configure the parameters at the Marketing Cloud account level, and then also remember to use those underscore delimiters in content name for SFMC. So setting up fields. Now, lead source is huge for a business. Again, if you work in any, especially a small business that's trying to set up their tracking, lead source is huge. Out of the box, it's generally based on referring domain. When you first switch on your Salesforce, it will pick up refer a domain, essentially. So you could have lead sources up to 15 might be normal. If that becomes difficult with your reporting, I definitely recommend at least trying out of the box. If it becomes difficult, then you can define your lead sources. And one of the best ways to do that is using Pardot. You then need to set up in all of your systems end-to-end, Pardot, Salesforce, Marketing Cloud, and so on, UTM fields for campaign, source, and medium. And lead source, like I said, should be there, but you just have to decide how to use it. I've also got lots of documentation if you need it on UTMs and how they work and how to train businesses. But basically, source is the origin of your traffic. So it could be like Google, domain, Facebook. Medium is the category. So organic versus cost per click versus referral. The challenge with that is that you'll get a lot of direct, which basically just means browser didn't allow us to know where they came from. So direct is huge. And yeah, these are all available out of the box from Google Analytics. They're still pretty much the best tracking to use, and you would set this up across all of your systems, which I think, did I say it here? No. I think I've said in a different presentation that you need to check how they go map from object to object. So from unknown to prospect to lead to contact to account to opportunity, that should all be taken across on conversion. We can talk about that if you need to. Hide the fields. So once you've set up the fields in your CRM system, your form handler that's connected to your form handler, so this will be different depending on which form handler or API you're using, or which CMS the form is hosted on. You need to force the form to pick up the UTMs. So you'll have to look up the instructions, or I can find them for you, but basically you're hiding those fields in the form, and those hidden fields will pull through into your reporting system so the customers don't see them. The reason that you do that is, like I was saying, with the objects. So the source fields on that individual lead, once it's converted to a contact, that can actually push over to opportunities in Salesforce, for example. And then you've got enriched revenue data. So you can connect that back to all of the top of funnel and attribute it back to the original marketing campaign budget and activity using campaigns in Salesforce. And this is the bit that we talked about at the start. So apply those tracking codes. This is the simplest bit. And yeah, I mean, you literally have to just remind people, go around and every single inbound channel, make sure there's tracking codes. That's probably the short version. And make it really easy. Make a tracking code builder so that there's no excuse not to apply tracking codes. Then you need to set up attribution analytics. So the diagram at the bottom there's a lot that we can talk through around attribution, but it's not just last click. It shouldn't be first click either. It's quite a wily path. And so we definitely need to set up your analytics properly to make sure that you can capture all of that. And then testing. So with your tracking codes, put your tracking codes onto the URL and actually test it in a browser. If it drops off, that's probably a redirect. I've got some more troubleshooting ideas, but yeah, so just actually test it and then put it on the original URL if that doesn't work. Visit the landing page with your tracking code, complete a form, complete a goal, and then actually see how that came through the entire system. Some just really common troubleshooting, link shortening, check how it's been implemented or implement it. Check the Saint classifications in Adobe. If the goals aren't firing, it's most likely Google Tag Manager. So a lot of webmasters set up Google Analytics and then they kind of didn't finish setting up Google Tag Manager. It's always like an unfinished project. Check say lead sources, that's a really important one on opportunities. So lead sources on opportunities in Salesforce, you'd actually check the field relationships. Is there any kind of overwrite? Because with opportunity, there are lots of contacts connected to an account. I'm going to all of that later, but opportunity lead sources are really important for revenue because opportunities are tied to revenue within Salesforce. Find the final resolved URL if the tracking code is dropping off. If you can't see your tracking code in Google Analytics, you can actually make up funny ones. I used to send jokes to all of my analysts all the time. But you can use different tracking codes to test, and then you can always make sure, like, check the page source and check that you're looking at the right Google Analytics instance to get the results. Marketing Cloud goals not appearing in GA360. Again, I've got a list of troubleshooting for that one, so ask me if that's something that you've got an issue with, but primarily check the tracked domains. You need to put each of them in. The resolved domains have to be listed. Make sure that the accounts or the connector accounts have the right admin roles, and that you've synced to the right views and properties in Google Analytics. So minor, but yeah. And then reporting discrepancies is nearly always, like, if you've always got that sales manager and marketing manager arguing about, oh, but you said it's 106 and it's really 109. It's nearly always time zones, especially if your company goes across regions. So consider data freshness and time zones if it's actually reporting discrepancy. And bonus, most important, if you've set up your collect code, which is the first one, the Salesforce one, and I would encourage everyone to do that. Next, you would want to set up your connect code, which is your forcing GA cleared. So this again comes down to that first party data piece. This is enabling Salesforce ID to sync with Google Analytics ID. This opens up entirely different reports in Google Analytics. And it also, basically, it can help you measure offline conversions that result from online campaigns. You can actually obviously take it off into a Tableau or something and look for patterns within there. But basically, it's just to get better pipeline insights and to link up after, like, nobody ever sets up their Google Analytics with real goal values. So this is a way to make sure that you have some connection through to revenue. If you've set up Salesforce properly, then you'll have a connection all the way through to from actual marketing spend, top of funnel, through to revenue. So that's the short version. But what's most important here is that this is also a unique user ID. It's almost, I think at some stage very soon this will be removed. So I recommend that everyone right now sets these up if they can and collects as much first party data as they can, connect it to that single unique record over the next year and a half, because these kinds of things are going to be taken away from us at some point. Yeah, so I get excited about this bit. It might not make sense to you. I think that that's all. Yeah, and then just to recap. Yeah, so that's the end. Thanks for attending. Can I stop recording?
Amazing. Thanks so much, Kristen.
You're very welcome. Now
I have a million questions, but I think I'm actually going to go back and rewatch this recording. Well, because I missed the first 10 minutes, but yeah, I'll come to you with questions after I've done that, I think, and reviewed the deck as well.
Awesome. Trying to find how to get out of recording. How can I
Don't know.
Cool. Anyone else? I'd love to do that, Joy. That would be awesome.
No, but that was awesome. Thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, so I don't know, I'll share it in the I have too many tabs.